Nice. Cool. Yeah, hello. I am Charlie Porter. I am the comms officer for Sheffield GCU. So we're currently, this meeting's being hosted by Sheffield GCU. I'm currently joined by Chris Saltmarsh from the Grassroots Left Slate and also Sheffield GCU member. And I'm about to be joined by our other candidates. Here we go. Here's and we've got Sophie Chris here, and we're also due to be joined by Zarah Sultana briefly. There's some transport issues. Yes, this is a Q&A for the two Yorkshire candidates for the Grassroots Left Slate, and also for Zarah Sultana, who's running for the public office holder seat. We're going to have a bit of a sort of informal chat and hear from the candidates, and then there's plenty of opportunities for questions, and we'll kind of make sure that any questions people have about the slate, have about the politics they're running on in Yorkshire, but also nationally. This isn't just a Yorkshire focused event. We're trying to make sure we're really covering all of our bases that we can here. So let's get started.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, I thought it would be useful to maybe start by speaking a bit, not necessarily about the internal politics of your party, which has been a big, obviously, source of discussion during these CEC elections, but to speak a bit about the broader political possibilities that come with building your party, and maybe the more motivating reasons for us even doing this in the first place. Like, for me, it's quite clear that there's no party in this country that is putting forward a complete analysis of the crises that we face. Obviously, the cost of living crisis and the broader kind of social and economic stagnation, the climate crisis, and imperialist aggression that is being waged internationally as well. Not least all of their basis in a kind of shared system of capitalism and imperialism. And furthermore, I don't think, even if there are some parties that might acknowledge these crises or may even talk about anti-capitalism, again, I don't really think there's a party other than the potential of your party that does more than reflecting back to people kind of what they already think. I think there's a real potential in your party of almost playing a kind of educational role in the political system, where we make an argument about what's going on both in Britain and the world at large, and what we need to do to respond. And so I'm standing on the Grassroots Left Slate alongside Sophie, Zarah, and many others, because I think we want to build your party into something that is strident and bold in expressing a socialist politics, both a socialist understanding of the crises we face and a programme for how to resolve them. I'm also standing with the support of an organisation called Eco-Socialist Horizon, which I've been involved in building. Really, for me, the possibility of your party is substantially down to being able to build a party that maybe not immediately, but becomes something that is kind of proudly and stridently eco-socialist. For me, quite simply, what that means is a kind of socialism that recognises that climate crisis is like the defining issue of our time, alongside those other crises. And that there's no way of really building socialism without addressing the climate crisis, but there's also no way of addressing the climate crisis without socialism. And so what does that mean? I think the possibility, the opportunity of your party is to build a political vehicle to express that politics, certainly in the immediate term, in a way that is able to advance socialist struggle, but also, directly address like the climate crisis, the cost of living crisis, and imperialism. For me, that could be, and what this actually looks like will be down to members when we actually create the democratic party that we need. But for me, that could look like a few quite simple measures, but that really kind of like take a step change in British politics in terms of being much more confrontational with capitalism as a system. Like, I think that could include and should include an approach of nationalising the entire energy system, including fossil fuel companies, but crucially doing that without compensation, so that we're not kind of like subsidising capital for all of the violence that they've already wrought and all that's already been stolen. And doing that with the intention of winding down the fossil fuel industry really quite rapidly. And then on the flip side of that is, again, using the tools of nationalisation and public ownership to invest in new clean energy, new green industries, electrification, retrofitting homes and buildings. That's the flip side of that kind of decarbonisation effort. And here, again, there's a kind of flavour of a Green New Deal politics that would have been quite popular maybe 5 or 6 years ago, in terms of jobs guarantees for people who might be affected by the transition, But for me, the difference, the kind of the step change again, is in moving beyond a kind of a program of addressing climate change and social inequality that maybe seeks to work with capital or work with corporations in some way, bring them along, to one that is necessary in this moment, which is about really directly confronting capital, having a confrontation with it, recognizing that the role for profit in these kind of key areas of the economy has to completely end. And I think that also speaks to the importance of eco-socialism in our daily lives. It's not just about these kind of big macroeconomic picture things about like who owns what in the economy, as you know, incredibly important as that is. It's about how we experience the everyday life of living in this country and living through the crises. And so I think a big part of the kind of eco-socialist politics that I see your party as having the opportunity to promote is one of directly addressing the cost of living crisis through the very same measures, through price controls, for example, on food, on energy, on water, on housing, on clothes, these basic things that we all need and have no choice but to consume in our daily lives, the price of which is being driven up in significant part by climate change, but also not exclusively by other pressures as well. So I think it's also important to be clear that, you know, when we're articulating this kind of socialist politics of transformation in the British context, this isn't just about making life tolerable for British people while global crises kind of unfold. It's about reorienting the role of Britain towards a really substantial anti-imperialist politics of solidarity with the people who are, yeah, really on the sharp edge of these crises around the world. And so for me, I think, you know, one of the exciting functions that a mass socialist party, as we hope your party will develop into, can play, is to really concretize what we mean by anti-imperialism, coordinate the really vibrant and exciting movements, for example, against the genocide in Gaza that we've seen over the past couple of years, into a political program for unpicking the structures of imperialism and Britain's contribution to reproducing them. Most obviously, this means a program of demilitarization. And I think this is, you know, one of the real contributions that your party could make to the political discourse of saying it is time to finally retrench or kind of, yeah, divest Britain of its just absolutely huge and outsized military spending, and to divert those financial resources to decarbonization, to, as I say, keeping prices down, but also crucially just to restraining the kind of imperialist and violent excesses of the British state as it participates in the global system. I think part of that means ending the kind of the special relationship that the UK supposedly has with the US, but really is just a kind of subordinate relationship, a kind of junior partner in an imperialism that is concretely based around the US. And I think one of the things that your party can do is articulate that imperialism is not just a kind of policy that some governments might choose to do by invading a country, but is actually a structure that revolves around the reproducing the power and the interests of the US and the capitalist class globally, but also within that kind of country altogether. And so what does that mean in practice? I think it looks like your party within the UK leading an international movement where we form new alliances with governments or movements that are committed to socialism, but also explicitly opposing US empire. So I think, you know, it's important to make those points about actually what role can your party bring to British politics as distinct to, you know, certainly the Labour Party, which is very committed to reproducing imperialism, or the Green Party, which maybe doesn't express it in such a robust anti-imperialist and socialist way. Because these internal elections absolutely are about how do we build this party, but we should, in my opinion, should keep our eyes on why we're doing it. And I think for me, the Grassroots Left Slate is a really exciting contribution to the CEC elections because we've all come together around a political platform that is one about building the party for maximum member democracy so that members have the opportunity to determine what our political platform is and what our strategy is for achieving it. But also we're saying, you know, we're prepared to advocate for that politics, that socialist politics, that anti-imperialist politics, and lead the party, with those values and those principles going forward.
Nice one. Thank you very much, Chris. And yeah, as you might be able to see in the background, at Sheffield UCU, we are currently in dispute with management. We are some of our members are currently being locked out as well for refusing to make up lost teaching that was through legally taken strike action last year, and now our members are being told that if they don't make up that teaching during the exam time, that they're not going to get paid. Chris is actually one of our members who is locked out. We've got a fundraiser for those staff that are locked out on Linktree /Sheffield UCU. Which should be in the chat. So if anyone, there's also a petition in there. We think it's a really important battle for setting the precedent that you shouldn't be punished for strike action by having your wages withheld and then punished again when you return to work and for refusing to undermine your own strike action. We obviously grateful for the opportunity to be able to host Grassroots Left Slate candidates in our offices for today, because I'm a member of your party. Obviously, Sheffield UCU is neutral in party politics, but as a member myself, I think we've got a really exciting opportunity to have a party that puts rank and file trade unionists at its heart, rather than a party that sort of cozies up to trade union bureaucrats who have often let us down. Our next speaker will be Sophie Wilson, who is also running on the Grassroots Left Slate, and I'm joined by now.
Hi, thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Chris. I'll just start by saying, 100% solidarity to you guys at UCU, and completely agree with much of what Chris was saying as well. I think I probably come at this election from a slightly different background and perspective to Chris. Whilst I agree with you on the eco-socialist angle, I'm really glad that that we're standing together on the slate so we can have that combination of experiences. My experience is a little bit different. So I come from the Labour Party, as do many people who have now joined your party. I was a councillor and a parliamentary candidate in 2019. I was a councillor for 5 years for the Labour Party, and then resigned and carried on as an independent for another 2 years. And that was, it wasn't an easy thing to do, and I'm really glad I did it. I got to present some good contributions to the floor, I think, including no-cuts budgets, the Tory minimum service levels, and stopping bailiffs employed by the council, going after council tax as well, and moving towards an ethical debt collection policy. So I think whilst those were all really valid contributions, did them, one thing that always struck me, when I met up with other independents, socialist independents, of course, because independence can mean quite anything, and that's been part of the problem. But one of the big problems was that we were always very atomised, being independent, and really there was very little accountability. Whilst I think that I did a good job, I would have been far more comfortable if there was a network of members to be accountable to, and that's something that I've been passionate about since before the Labour Party, that is how politics should be structured, at least if we are engaging in this first past the post system, which of course Grassroots Left has said that we prefer to move away from. But whilst we are engaging in that, I do think it's very important, and I've been arguing for some time, that we do need a mass party of the working class. I think that's really vital now. And I really like what you said, Chris, about being more confrontational with capitalism. I think that's completely vital as well. All of us have done so much of tinkering around the edges of capitalism. And I could stand here today and tell you many policy points that I'd like your party to engage with. Some of the things I've been really passionate about over the past few years has been housing and, renters' rights and justice for people who are given a really crap deal under the current system and the housing system. One of those policies that I've always advocated for is ending right to buy, and I'm still very passionate about that. But actually, when we're confronting capitalism in the way that you're talking about and the way that Grassroots Left is talking about, we can go so much further than that, can't we? We need to be so much more bold and imaginative with our vision. And I think that's why this party is so exciting, and why it will be exciting to get that maximum member democracy that we're talking about. I don't want to see a rehash of kind of, the left ideas that we've had over the past 10 years. And whilst they were great and really really appropriate for the time. I think especially, since the COVID pandemic, we've seen a huge energy crisis. We've seen a ramping up of anger from the working class, which is now leading to the rise of the far right. That's been in the works for quite a few decades. I don't want to just put that down to COVID and Brexit. That's been in the works for some time, and we're really seeing it come to fruition now. We're seeing an amping up of militarization and wars across the world, and violence and imperialism across countries that I think people of my generation haven't experienced in the past, at least in our adult life anyway. And that's been, quite a shock when we thought that things can only get better. Things did slightly get better, apart from, the Iraq War, and it's getting better over the past 10 years. And we thought we were really heading in the right direction under Jeremy Corbyn in Labour, and, really devastating losses for us in 2017 and 2019. But the situation has changed, and I do think it is time, as you say, to be more confrontational and to be imaginative. And I think that we're going to see some really exciting policies come from the membership of this party. I can't wait, when we have a democratic structure and we have conferences where that aren't organised by a sortition. It's accountable delegates who can report back to their branches, who are well funded and well structured and well supported and are running their own campaigns within their community. Think about, the exciting proposals that can come from that. Think about, when we can get in a meeting and composite something and really come to a compromise and actually say, let's, not forget all of that. That was really useful background for us. But this is how we want to move forward. This is a chance for us to reimagine society. And I think there's a real appetite for that from the general population and voters and people in our community. I think it's very important to meet people where they're at. And it's very important to say, look, this is why you're experiencing X, Y, Z. This is why you have no money. This is why you're struggling to afford your water and your energy bills. This is why you're struggling to afford food to put on your table for your family, despite, working 2-3 jobs. I think it's really important to relate to that lived experience and to say, actually, it's not that we just want to lower your energy bills a little bit and give you, give the poorest a voucher here and there to spend on energy, or, we're going to increase access to food banks, etc. Actually, I think it would be really great to be able to go out to people and say, it doesn't have to be like this. It never had to be like this. And we want to ensure that it's never like this again. And I think that kind of barrier, what I'm saying about we never want it to be like this again, is something that we've struggled with previously, when we're not advocating for a full socialist programme. Some of the gains that Labour have made when they've been in government in the past have been, good improvements to people's lives, but they were so easily undone. And I think that's the key here. We need to make sure that we put mechanisms in place so that any improvements that we do make can't be instantly reversed if we lose power. It needs to be long lasting, and we need to not be thinking, 5 years and what's the GDP increase in that 5 years. We need to be thinking in 20, 30, 40 years, in the next generation or two, how have we improved society? And as Chris said, how have we contributed to a better environment for our children and our grandchildren and so on? And I think that's why I am very enthused and excited about this party. I'm very happy to be standing on the Grassroots Left Slate, because I think it's the first time, and throughout my entire political history and adult life, that I've seen a platform that I think actually this could work.
Nice one. Yeah, thank you very much, Sophie. And yeah, our final speaker for today, so these two candidates are on the Grassroots Left Slate for Yorkshire. We also have one of our candidates for the public office holder, Zarah Sultana MP.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to have missed most of Chris's contribution, but I'm so inspired by what you were talking about, Sophie. To those of you who don't know, my name's Zarah Sultana. I'm running for public office holder as part of the Grassroots Left Slate. And I think what's really exciting about our platform is recognising the role of our members and our branches. And I've had the privilege of being able to travel across the country, including Scotland and Wales as well, where branches, proto branches who haven't been recognised, who have no resources, have been organising. They've been holding events in Coventry. Our proto branch has had a stall in the city centre for weeks, talking about the charges at the local hospital for the car park. Has held an event on a people's budget, and so for me, recognising branches immediately is incredibly important, as well as providing them with the resources, because otherwise people are being burdened and it's an unsustainable way of organising locally. We're campaigning on a platform of at least 50% of membership subs going straight to branches. We're also talking about member democracy being at the heart of what we're building. And ultimately, this platform has candidates that come from real life experiences. We've got firefighters, former nurses, teachers, anti-racist organisers, people involved in the climate movement, people who have worked in local government like Sophie, and it's about talking about how we can build a party of the working class. And as Sophie said, we in British politics have often just tinkered around the edges. We'll talk about a wealth tax and we'll talk about nationalising a few industries. But really, when we look at the scale of the challenges we face, we know that nothing less than a socialist transformation of society will really change things in our country. And when we talk about democratising society and democratising the economy, we have to talk about democratising our party. And over the past few months, people have been very disappointed with what they've seen, whether it's the way people were expelled on the eve of conference, whether it was the referendum that was held over Christmas where constitutional changes were made. All of these things are very undemocratic, and we want a party that treats members as decision makers. This is a party led by our membership, for our membership, by our membership, and that means MPs like myself not having control over the direction. It is a collective leadership, and that was a huge win by members at conference. As a slate, we are pushing for members to decide what this party stands for, what the money is used for, what the strategy essentially is, and a party that welcomes disagreement, recognising that actually that is a strength of our movement rather than something that you get disciplined for. And also, I think it's important to highlight that we are not here to build another Labour Party where you have a small group at the top that basically decides everything, including who the candidates are, what the priorities are, what policies we will pursue, but also the hostile briefings, the witch hunts, and the way that we saw debate silenced at conference. I think those are all very anti-democratic things that we all have to challenge. And our conference has to be sovereign. What's passed at conference has to be what our elected representatives enact in local government, in Westminster, in the Senate, in Holyrood. And essentially, my pitch has been quite simple, that if people haven't joined the party already, they absolutely must. It's £1.50. They should support the Grassroots Slate if they believe in members running this party, if they believe that their branches should be given the respect that they deserve with immediate recognition, if they believe that members should have resources to be able to organise collectively. And I think this plays into what we're seeing, especially with the by-election in Gorton and Denton. If our branches had been recognised already, if they had the resources, we would have a candidate. And so these debates aren't just intellectual debates, they are having real life consequences right now in one of the most high profile by-elections in the country. And so for us to really take this party into a more democratic direction, it's important that the Grassroots Left Slate wins majority. And then we can actually go out to the country with a message about how we can change society and make material improvements to their lives.
Nice one. Thank you very much. So yeah, we've got plenty of time for questions from our audience. We are going to encourage people to ask questions. We don't want to sort of put pressure on people to be asking very specific things or asking questions we're not asking you to ask a question in 30 seconds. You've got some time if you want to make a bit more of an elaborate point. we think it's important that members are heard as much as possible, and that includes at these things. Which well, personally, I don't want a top table speaking at people. We want a table. We want an encouraging, sort of engaged conversation. If people could put their hands up to ask questions, that would be best. If you don't have a working microphone or something, you can put a question in the chat, and I'll read it out. See a hand from Kieran. Do you want to come in?
Right, hopefully I've unmuted now. Yeah, I've enjoyed the contribution so far. Obviously, I'm a supporter of the Grassroots Left Slate from Barnsley here in South Yorkshire. We passed a motion a couple of weeks ago in support of the Grassroots Left Slate, encouraging all our members to vote for the candidates. But the question I've got really is in relation to this election. Once it's all over, what do you think, all three of you? What do you think the priority should be within the party itself in terms of organising, arranging another conference, etc.? And most importantly, what are the priorities going to be for building outwards, both to support struggle and to encourage struggle? Because I've been quite depressed the way your party really has not attempted to mobilise anything in support of what's going on in Gaza or anything like that. I think the desperate need is to turn outwards as quickly as possible. So I'm interested to know both internally and externally what Zarah, Sophie and Chris think we should be doing. Thank you.
Nice one. Any more questions? We'll take a few in a round, and then we'll come back to our panelists. We've got a question from Justin as well.
Right, yeah, hi. I'm from Cambridge, by the way, so I was taking an interest in this. I'm with the Grassroots Slate, by the way, as well, Grassroots Left Slate. I just want to ask, post elections, after it's finished, is because sometimes I know we hear the power of positive thinking, but sometimes we need to look at the power of negative thinking. And what I mean by that is there a plan B? Say if we don't get enough majority on the left slate, for example, so if we lose, say, oh, is there a plan B? What do we do after that? So what do we do next? Because we need to think about that, and we need to have a plan in place, so we're not just flailing in the wind or whatever. And or also, actually, what could also be possible is that there's a complete split between the two, and the bureaucracy will just bide its time and find other maneuvers to eventually defeat us. So we need a plan B for all these kind of things, I think, so we can still eventually, in the end, beat them. Because I've already seen, and I confess, by the way, that I didn't vote for. There was a vote for excluding people, wasn't there? The dual membership. I didn't vote on that because to me it seemed like a false choice, and now it's playing out. We've already seen people excluded from CEC elections because they used that vote to exclude them anyway. That's my question. Thanks. Bye.
Nice one. Thank you, Justin. Any more hands, or should we take these two questions and keep and come back around? Okay, we'll take those for now. Should we go in reverse order? Do you want to go first, Sarah?
Yes, sure. So I will start off with what happens after these elections. So if we do what we plan to do over the next few weeks, which is to recruit before the end of the 4th of February, which is the deadline for new members, and once elections open, if we get a majority on the CEC, we would immediately recognise branches and provide them with the resources so they can actually run in viable seats across the country. The May elections are still within sight, and the difficulty that we have is the fact that branches are unable to select their own candidates. So that would be one of the first action points that I think we would do with a majority on the CEC. There are other things like ensuring branches have membership data. The fact that, you know, people have to bring up pieces of paper to find out who else is a member in their local area, and people have obviously been creative with WhatsApp groups and so forth, but the lack of membership data, the lack of transparency is unacceptable. And we also have to provide them with the resources, like I mentioned, at least 50% of membership subs. Beyond that, my priority will be recruiting. I plan to obviously speak at as many events up and down the country, especially universities, to recruit, which is a big part of my work anyway. But also be present wherever there are sites of struggle. So earlier this week, I was in Colombia. I was invited by Progressive International as part of an emergency meeting to organize around the US's actions in Latin America, and we've seen how that's escalated towards Cuba. As soon as I came back from there, I headed to the Unite picket line in Birmingham in solidarity with the bin strikers. And then yesterday I was at the PSC national demonstration, which was the 34th national demonstration. And we actually had a grassroots left block there. And we had a little demonstration at the start of the big national one. So our slate recognises that we must be mobilising and supporting all forms of struggle. And when Sophie was talking earlier, I think supporting tenants is going to be a big line of work. In Coventry, I've worked quite closely with Acorn, and providing support when tenants are facing eviction is a huge thing that we all have to be involved in. But it's also the work around anti-fascist mobilisations, and there's obviously a big demonstration coming up on the 28th of March called the Together Alliance demonstration, and we have to be part of that. We have to be mobilising our membership, and we also have to have a platform in those spaces. So that isn't a controversial thing for our slate. We are here to use the membership data. We're here to use the mailing list of around 800,000 to direct people and resources towards campaigns that are fighting back in our country, but also globally. And then the second question around if we don't win a majority, on that, I will just say that from the endorsements, we can see that we have great support, especially in Yorkshire, but also in many other parts of the country as well. And there are areas where we obviously have to do more work. And if we don't win a majority, I think we have to see how we can organise with who is elected. But I would rather work with the assumption that we will get a majority, because all the signs are already there with the endorsements. We have a plan of action over the next few weeks. We are doing so many outward facing events. We are on social media. Candidates are obviously making videos, and there is a lot of autonomy in that space to kind of lead your own independent campaigns in your local area. So I'm not thinking, what will we do if we don't form a majority? I'm not sure if Sophie and Chris are, because they might have a stronger course of action in that case.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and I also think that one of the key parts of the platform, which is a party for the whole left, is really key to both of these questions here. I think we need to turn inwards to be able to turn outwards. And we need to get our house in order. As Zarah said, we really do need to sort the branches out, and it's really disappointing, that we aren't prepared for this by-election. We aren't prepared for elections going forward at the current, if things stay as they are, and we want to change that as one of the first priorities. The branches have been meeting up and down the country, these proto branches, and that has been amazing work from comrades, networking with each other and finding out, who is supportive of your party, and making events and assemblies and conferences based on the back of that. But that is not sustainable, and that needs to be the priority. And one of the reasons that we need to make that a priority is because we need to turn outwards. There's a lot of talk, are we too inwards looking? And sometimes I completely accept why people ask that, but I really do believe, we need to sort this out before we can turn outwards. We can do in that, as Zarah said, we individually and within our networks that we've made ourselves can go out to picket lines and other demos, and that's great and fantastic. But we do need that network there to be able to encourage greater participation in the wider struggle. And the party of the whole left is really important as well. I was really disappointed when people people were barred from standing for the CEC and barred just before conference on grounds of being members of other groups or parties. These are the people who have been organising these demos. You know, these are the networks that exist. And, you know, people don't engage in politics on an individual basis, especially if they do class themselves as a socialist. It is a collective struggle. And so, of course, those activists, those people, however they want to describe themselves, who, you know, can be members of your party and are interested and enthused by us, and have also been creating the wider movement in the meantime, of course they're going to be members of other groups, because why wouldn't they be?
Yeah.
How else would they become politicized? And I think it's really important that they are all given a fair seat at the table as the rest of us, and that might not be members of other parties or groups. But at the end of the day, you know, when you extend that membership of another party or group, where does that end? You know, everybody or most people that I engage with on the left and that have been coming to the proto-branch meetings are very active in politics, and they will probably be engaged with some faction or grouping at some point, and they always have been, and that is natural and that is healthy, and that is something that we need to defend. And to turn outwards, I think that's going to be one of the key parts, you know, to make sure that it is a party of the whole left. We can't be turning up to Palestine demos whilst expelling the organisers of the Palestine demos. That doesn't make any sense, and will not build the wider movement of the working class, which is what we're aiming for. And is there a plan B, and would we split? I mean, personally, no. I am used to losing. I do think that, you know, I think looking at our endorsements, I'm actually really positive. And like Zarah, I think, you know, there's been really good support for this platform. I think part of that is because some of it is the obvious choice, you know, giving 50% of the fees to the branches, and so on. So I've been really pleased with the support. But again, I am used to losing and fighting within a system, and I am, you know, very up for continuing this and standing by the platform and standing by the politics that we are putting forward, and continuing to engage within the systems that are put in place to say, actually, this is how it should be. So if I lose, or if the Grassroots Left Slate loses, that's not going to be me saying, oh, I'll shut up talking about this now, but we'll continue. Further to that, again, I just want to stress the party of the whole left. You know, if this doesn't become the party of the whole left, eventually a party of the whole left will emerge. And I think, you know, we've kind of been in a flux over the past few years. Many of us, we've been waiting, you know, for people with enough clout to be able to launch something like this. And I think that now that people on the left have seen that there is so much support for this, that they would do it again themselves going forward if we didn't win this time. But for me, no, I don't think that the plan is to split. And I do actually, I'm quite confident that we can get our platform onto the CEC.
Nice one. And Chris?
Yeah, no, obviously completely agree with what Zarah and Sophie both say. And on that last point, yeah, I think it's completely right. Like, this is the idea of a mass socialist party in Britain that every single socialist can, like, not just be a member of, but actively develop and express their politics. It's an idea whose time has come. It's an idea that we can't now put back in the box. And I think Zara's absolutely right. That just reflects a consensus on the British left. And I think that is demonstrated in the support for our slate that we've seen so far, and like the excitement for our ideas, and that's been incredibly inspiring. So yeah, we don't know, you know, we're candidates rather than pundits. We don't know exactly how the election is going to go, but I'm quite confident that our slate will do really well. But regardless of whatever the composition is, I think we're really prepared to, like, be quite clear in expressing our politics and saying, look, we will have a mandate to you know, to implement this platform because it has so much support, because it's been developed by a whole range of groups. But at the same time, we recognize that we all need to come together and we need to work together to build this party. And, you know, yeah, Zarah, I think, is absolutely right that it's really good and really healthy that there's disagreements about how the party should be run. There are lots of different traditions around the question of a party. There's actually lots of different strands of thought within the Grassroots Left Slate, but it's a coalition of people who've come together and recognized that the maximum member democracy is actually just a precondition for achieving anything that we might want to achieve, whether it's a policy, whether it's, you know, questions about how and when we stand in elections. But for me, you know, you raise the hypothetical, and I think it's worth engaging with it. If the slate doesn't win a majority, then yeah, I agree. I think, you know, politics is about organizing and struggle, and we should continue to do that. And I think it would only be right in a democratic election that we continue to, we accept the result, but we continue to make our argument, and we do that through the appropriate structures, which I think would be in the branches. If for whatever reason, whether it's in a particular region or nationally, it appears that we've not won the argument, I don't think that, we can reflect on the strength of our ideas, but we can also say we actually are still convicted in our ideas, and we will continue to make that argument, continue to organize around our ideas in and through branches, and build that strength of support, continue to recruit members into the party on that basis. And yeah, that comes to Kieran's question as well. I think in terms of what is the priority, yeah, I completely agree that resourcing branches, founding branches, absolutely has to be the priority, because the branch will be the basic unit of the party through which the party grows, through which its democracy happens, through which we campaign, through which it generates a culture. And so if we're going to face outwards, we need something for people to come together around. Yeah, Zara's right. People need to know who their fellow members are. And I think when we talk about the role of the branch, for me, what the party can offer is bringing together these sometimes disparate initiatives and campaign groups. In Sheffield, for example, where we both live and organise, there's really good anti-raids organising. There's really strong anti-fascist organising. There's really strong Palestine solidarity organising. And sometimes those groups work together, and sometimes they kind of act in a silo. And I think the value add that the party can make is, yes, mobilising our members and supporters to those existing initiatives, but also bringing them together, providing a kind of coordinating function, providing some political coherence, and representing that politics in a kind of in the structures of a kind of regional and national scale as well. So yeah, I think Zarah and Sophie covered it all really well. So
what Chris was saying, I think we're also the unity platform when it comes to public office holders. We recognize that we need Jeremy to be elected onto the CEC, and that we recognize that that is a way that we can all move forward in a positive, healthy direction. But we are also the democracy platform. We have one platform, our platform, that is pushing for more democracy, more membership empowerment in a material way. And there is another slate that is perhaps arguing for less democracy. And that's what ultimately the difference is between the slates. We are saying that actually for this to be a different political party to what we see in Westminster, members have to be running the show, and they're not just passengers watching action unfold. And ultimately it is the 60,000 members that we have to engage. And I do think that the numbers of people who have engaged in the endorsements period isn't as high as we would like it to be. So there is a big body of work to encourage more of our membership to engage in this process around them having more democratic say on the party and how it's run.
Cool. Thank you very much. We've also got quite a few more questions. I think there's been a few in the chat, but I'm struggling to actually see the chat at the same time. So I'll come back to those in a second. Sorry. And we'll take, we've got Lee and Inacio as well. So Lee, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, I mean, Sheffield Left are fully supporting the grassroots left. I mean, Sophie's aligned with us in particular. So, we understand, as the speakers have put, how important it is that we can win these elections in terms of having that democracy, etc., and, taking it forward. My question is, if we win, hopefully that's the case, we can assume that despite the attempts and the calls for unity, that the others on the other slate, to be brutally honest, aren't going to be in a position where they were going to be seeking unity, even if, if they lose, I think they're going to be quite obstructive. So my question is, how prepared are we at the moment to deal with that? We've seen in lots of union elections, we saw in the Labour Party the role that the bureaucracy can play, and at the moment the bureaucracy is all aligned effectively behind the Corbyn slate. And if, as I say, if they lose, I can't see them just saying, well, fair result, well done everyone. I think it's going to be very difficult. So I just wonder how prepared the Grassroots Left Slate is for that. Thanks.
Cool. We've got take Inacio, and I think James Walsh wants to speak as well. So I'll take Inacio now.
Hey there, everyone. How's everyone doing? Obviously, Well, I want to talk about the election process, and we obviously going through this break period between endorsements and the actual voting. It's a very peculiar election, though, like an election where the organizers, the Independent Alliance, they set the rules, and they're also candidates in the election. It's like they're the referees and the players of one of the teams. They appoint the returning officer from their own groups and the treasurer who runs the appeals process. The elections are going to run on an STV method that we don't know what it is. I wonder when we're going to find out. It seems like they're waiting to gather more information to see what their preferred method may or may not be. It's obviously under their control. And then there's the issue of the Members Oversight Committee. There's like a piecemeal offering given by the interim leadership at conference. Nobody had ever mentioned or asked that. There was not a demand that came from the membership, but there was this offering of oversight by the members, and that should have been, according to them, should have been appointed before the election started. Only this week we heard that there's been a meeting. This meeting is not minuted. We never heard who the 5 members are that were appointed. We don't know under what conditions they were appointed. Don't know how they were picked. They were supposedly sortitioned, but were they sortitioned and then just accepted? Were they repicked, substitute? We don't know. We also know that these 5 sortition members, unnamed, are working with Independent Alliance in a meeting to define our position on whether we endorse the Greens or whether we don't endorse the Greens in the by-election at Gorton and Denton, which is like a political issue of such importance that for it to be taken under literally closed doors with, like we talked about unnamed bureaucrats before. Now we have members, we have supposedly oversight, but we can't see anything. We don't know who these people are. We want to know who these members are. So in with those 2 points, the STV, or 3 points, the election with candidates and where the candidates are also organizers, STV, that we don't know the message, and the members, the secret members of the site committee, making such big political decisions for the party. What concrete demands can we push over this week before the elections actually happen, to that we can push forward to get some resemblance of a more democratic process out of these elections?
Nice one. Thank you very much, Nacio. Was there a question from James as well?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks, James.
Yeah, I'm just saying, what are the panel's views on the by-election in South East Manchester, Gorton and Denton, coming up on Thursday, the 26th of February? Are your party suggesting members support the Green Party campaign to elect Hannah Spencer?
Nice one. So we've got 3 questions there. There's one from Anna as well.
Hey, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you now, sir.
Great. I've got fairly quite well-related question. As a foreigner who lives 20 years in England, I found it very attractive to join your party. For the first time in my life, I made a decision. And what I want to say is that there's been protest against the warfare in Palestine in Sheffield, and I've seen massive support of the locals, which has been incredible. And I have been also attending it in my Palestinian football jersey, which has put me kind of on a, how can I put it, on a very thin ice of a risky position because I'm still not citizen. I'm willing to apply, but with just attending protests alone as a foreigner, I'm risking a lot. So in fact, I've just thought that this is the first time in my life that this is making more sense than anything else than just to suffer on my own. So I found myself a great place. What I want to ask you, all three of you, is that there is a massive number of foreigners just like me who lives in England. We've got the best interns for the country and for everybody who's living in and for the world. How can the party reach out to them? How can they vote for? Because I've just registered myself last year for voting, which is incredible. And if I could do this, then anyone else of my kind can do this as well. So this can bring the large numbers to the polls. Thank you.
Nice one. Thank you very much. We will go in reverse order then from the previous round of questions. We've got Chris first.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Some good questions there. Yeah, in terms of, Lee's question about whether or not the other slate will or won't seek unity. I mean, I guess the first thing is to say we'll see. I think we, have put forward a really robust platform. We have a plan of how to build the party. And I think we should lead by example. I think, we should behave in a way that assumes good faith initially. We should, make the case for our ideas positively and seek to implement the democratic mandate that I'm pretty confident that we'll win. I think we should be leading by example because clearly a lot of people have been disaffected by how the founding of the party's gone so far. Fair enough. I think these elections are an opportunity to change the culture a bit, and really cultivate a shared sense of solidarity and working together. Because for all of the really strong disagreements that we have with other people in the party and the criticisms I think we'd all give to people who are running the show at the moment, kind of based on the points Anasi was saying, we are all in the same party. And if we want a party of the whole left, which I think we all do, then we've got to lead by example in terms of what unity looks like, because unity for the whole left is one of the main reasons why we'd have a mass socialist party. In terms of Anasi's question, I think those three things you identify are all examples of the failings of how the party is being run currently and why we felt it was so important to come together as the grassroots left. Not just to offer a kind of alternative vision, but with the fundamental idea that this party would be better run by its members, by grassroots members. The slate is composed of grassroots members who have been organizing in our communities, and with the founding of your party, in our branches, founding proto branches, keeping them going despite not having resources, despite not having data. It's clear that of the 800,000 people who registered interest, the fact that 60,000 people signed up, that's an incredible achievement, and we should really take that. But it's not enough. We could have been 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 members by now. And so I think in terms of what we do over the next week, I think we will, as a slate, continue to make interventions, ask questions, and ensure that things are run as above board as possible. But I think, as was said, we have a lot of support, we have a forward-looking vision, and I think we have an imperative to continue to make the case of how we would run things as distinct to how they're going at the moment. On the question of the by-election, I think, as Zarah said before, it's a real wasted opportunity that we didn't have branches ready to go for this. This by-election would have been a really big opportunity to build the party, to make the case about why we are able to make a socialist offer, but none of the other parties are currently making. And so it's a waste and it's a shame. And I think we should make clear that it's not for me or Sophie in Sheffield to say how we should have intervened in that by-election. It should have been for the members in that part of the country. And so I think if we're in a situation where we don't, for the reasons that we've made clear, we're not in a position where that is possible, then I don't think a small group of people should be making that decision behind closed doors. And then finally from Anna, it's really great to hear about the inspiration that you've had to join the party, and I think you absolutely are. You put the nails on the head there. What the party can get you is the difference between experiencing politics individually like going along to a protest is a kind of collective act, but sitting at home, reading the news, reading social media, despairing about the world, which I think we all do. Then going along to a protest is the first time of kind of experiencing collective politics. But what a party does is it pushes it even further. It's not just about going to something on your own. It's about experiencing politics in this collective way where we can come together in branches to have different types of meetings where we try and understand the world together and like go through this like really difficult process of figuring out what is actually going on, what is a socialist understanding of the crises that we're facing, and crucially like what action we can take together, whether that's going to or organizing demonstrations, whether it's organizing other campaigns, whether it's mobilizing against the far right. The politics is about the collectivity, and I certainly hope and would want to make sure that those branches are like incredibly welcoming spaces for everyone, regardless of whether you're born in this country or not, regardless of your background, regardless of your political experience. I think the branches will necessarily be places where veterans of socialism who've been involved in organizing in different groups or non for decades will come together. But there'll also be spaces where people come to their first ever political meeting. And I think we'll all be able to learn from each other. We'll all be able to develop in our socialism together, and we'll all be able to express it together.
Agree with much of what Chris said as well. So I'm going to start with Lee's. So let's just assume for a minute that Lee's correct. I like Chris, I do like to assume good faith, but let's assume that Lee is correct, and the other slate, if they lose, do not seek unity. And what do we do going forward? I think this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with, we've already introduced the idea of a mass working class socialist party, and that now can't be put away. So I think kind of developing from that and the previous questions is, I think, that this is going to happen. This party is going to have it happen, whether it's in its current form, which is what we would like, to build on your party, which been around since, was it June or July when it was first announced? But we're building from that. That's what we prefer. And if this is not the vehicle, I think people on the organised left in Britain will create that space for themselves, especially now that we've seen the support going forward. I'm really happy with how this slate was created. It was created in a completely different way to the many slate, and in a completely different way to slates that are often created in the Labour Party and in various trade unions. And what I mean by that is it was a group of existing left networks and groups that came together to collectively vote on and democratically agree a platform and candidates. So those networks, people who might have been arguing for decades, have come together and are saying, finally, at last, let's work together. This is what's important. Let's put that forward. And I think, whether we lose or if we are met with various forms of adversity and hostility, those networks are created. And I think now we have a really good example of good practice going forward and how we continue to organise and out-organise people. And I think that will be really important if we are met with hostility, which Lee is correct, could be a big part of our day-to-day runnings of the CEC going forward. The second question in ACO presented, to be honest, I don't have much to add to that, because I think the problems that you're posing are correct, and that is why we're standing for a more democratic process. And the way that you explained it perfectly. It's not right, it's not fair, and going forward, that's something that we wouldn't be standing for. And I think, as Zarah said earlier, we want to be a party that actually trusts its members, isn't patronising, says, yeah, we can do this and we do trust you. And I think that is how we're going to get the best results going forward. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. But I do think it's important that we are, that we remain critical of what's happening in the present time. And the views on the Manchester by-election, similar to Chris, I don't really think it's our place in Sheffield to say what should have been happening in Manchester. Similarly, I don't think it's our place as candidates for the CEC to say particularly. But what I will say is building on, what's already been said, with it's really disappointing that we're not in a position to be able to put up a candidate and to ask the members, you know, do you have a candidate ready? Do you have networks and support across the constituency? You know, do you feel ready that we can go for this? That would be my number one question. But say they did, and because of what's happened within your party, that's probably not going to happen. I'm not in the business of saying that if your party members want to support the Greens, that they shouldn't then be allowed in your party. You know, if people make a decision for themselves within that area, and they are upholding their socialist beliefs and, you know, voting for what they see as the best candidate, then go for it. On Anna's question, you know, how do we reach out to people, you know, who are not born here, maybe don't have citizenship? And I think part of that is within our international solidarity and going back to, you know, being engaged in the networks that are already there, you know, attending the Palestine demos, which Zarah did yesterday, and many others from your party and the Grassroots Left Slate, and also standing in solidarity with socialists across the world, you know, not saying, you know, this is a British project, this is an international project, as socialism is, and standing by that. And I think that is the way that we recruit people like you, Anna. And I'm really glad that, you know, that you've shared that this was a place that you felt that, you know, that you could be welcomed and engage with, and hopefully that can be translated going forward. But yeah, absolutely agree with what Chris was saying. I think that's going to be something that adds real value to your party compared to other parties, particularly when it gets to our immigration and Home Office policies.
Nice one. Thank you very much, Sophie. And Zarah?
They've covered everything in great detail, but I will attempt all of the questions as well. So I think the question around how do we deal with a hostile bureaucracy, this is where members have to step in. This is a fight that cannot be then just taken by those of us who are standing on the Grassroots Left Slate. We often think of socialist governments coming into power, and if they don't have the support of people in trade unions on the streets and that popular power, then their program can essentially be dismantled. It's about looking at how that plays out within the context of a party. If there is a struggle at the top, that's where the membership needs to basically fight back and organise through branches, and ensure that democracy is upheld. As hostile as the bureaucracy can be, ultimately power does lie with members in organising and fighting back. And many of us who have had experience in the Labour Party saw how that bureaucracy can play out when Jeremy became leader. We saw how regional offices were more than just hostile to the programme, but actively working against him, and obviously all the reports that came out later. We do not want to be fighting amongst ourselves. We want to be going out to the country, supporting workers in struggle and organising and mobilising. That has to be our priority. So we will need the membership to take on a lot of that fighting if that happens, and I don't think it will. But it's always best to be prepared. So members have to, you know, be prepared. On the points that Ignacio mentioned, STV, candidates, also being organisers, and the oversight committee. I mean, these were the problems right from the very start, where you know, MPs were calling the shots and not allowing members to actually have any power. And now we see what that leads to. I think some of the kind of things that we can do in the run up to the elections being opened is highlight our concerns as the Grassroots Left Slate, so it's out there in the open and people know exactly what we're working with, so at least there's some attention on it. I think talking about some of the concerns we have around the returning officer, being someone who was also on conference floor, and the other points that Anita mentioned around the treasurer, I think it's worth having that out there. So we're not in the business of just kind of talking about things you know, in closed rooms or just on Zoom, but I think it's definitely got merit in being out there just as a kind of, these are the things we're concerned about. Can we seek assurances from the centre of the party on some of these in the run up to the election? And then I'm going to come back to the question about the by-election. I just want to come to Anna. your contribution is incredibly inspiring. Whenever someone says this is the first time I've ever joined a political party, it's incredibly humbling to think that you have seen what we're building and you want to be part of that. And obviously, it's been a very messy process getting here. No one ever said building a socialist party for the working class would be an easy endeavor. But when you talk to comrades across Europe and you talk about comrades across Latin America, where building new left parties is something they do every other week, it seems. They definitely can empathize with what we've been going through. But this is like Chris mentioned and Sophie as well, people have been talking about a left party for ages. And this political moment that we find ourselves in is incredibly difficult, dark, but also rare, where we have a Labour government that is enabling genocide, that is pushing through austerity, that is part of the race to the bottom on immigration. We see the far right dominating the polls, and there has to be an alternative. And, you know, in the mix of all of that, you've got the climate crisis, you've got inequality going right through the roof, but you've also got a raising of political consciousness. And, you know, the 34th national demonstration in Palestine means that these issues aren't just going to go away. So how can we build a party that is able to embrace those struggles and be part of them is incredibly important. And I think the question, especially about how we can engage with communities that often aren't represented, it's about having a party with members from those communities, a leadership with members from those communities, how we talk being accessible, how we campaign being accessible, and all the issues. And Sophie said it, housing is the most important issue in our communities. It is how people are often able to connect so many different struggles. If they're a renter, if their house is privately, they have a private landlord, or whether it's a council-owned property, what is happening with land in our country, and all that different forms of exploitation and extraction that take place. And I think if we can organise around housing, especially with precarious workers, migrant communities, I think that gives us that will give us a lot of support. But the basics of that also include making sure that when we eventually do produce leaflets and do political education, we are able to translate that into languages of the communities that we belong to, and that we are organising. It means working with trade unions, like the much smaller ones that are, as well as the big ones, obviously, but that are unionising migrant workers. In Coventry in particular, the Amazon warehouse unionisation campaign was built by migrant workers taking the lead, and it's about us supporting those endeavours. And then obviously understanding that you can't just expect people to vote for you, you also have to be with them when they struggle. And then just finally, on the question around the Greens, I think we've talked about this quite a lot, the fact that there should have been a Your Party candidate on the ballot, the fact that the branches should have been able to elect their candidate. And I've had people who have come up to me and said, you know, that there has to be a Your Party candidate. And I say, well, there isn't an official recognised branch. And even if someone said, I am the Your Party candidate, they would have to have permission from the centre of the party to be on the ballot paper as a Your Party candidate with the logo and everything. And that is just not going to happen as far as I can see. And it is an infuriating situation we find ourselves in, and that cannot happen ever again. And that's why we need to make sure the Grassroots Left Slate is elected to recognise branches so they can elect their candidates and they can have data and resources so this cannot be repeated. But I just would echo Sophie in the last remark that you made, where we are not here to discipline people who make decisions as Mancunians engaging in this by-election. It's just a deeply regrettable situation we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much. I've been sent the questions that are in the chat that I can't see. So I'll run through those, and then we'll probably, unless there's any sort of quick questions anyone wants to get in, we'll probably wrap up after this round of questions, looking at the time. We have a question from Jay that says, the first priority for CEC-GL elected majority is a Truth and Transparency Commission to draw a line under what the faceless bureaucrats and members have been up to. A question from Kieran says, what happens to a person elected to the CEC as a public office holder if they lose their public office? And a question from Simon that says, given that your party needs to be a mass party of the working class and to be able to succeed in stopping reform in the next general election, and you say in the Grassroots Left platform that your party should be a party for the whole left, in light of the recent Supreme Court judgment of April 2025 and subsequent tribunal judgments, such as in the case of the Darlington nurses, do you think that people who want to defend women's rights to single-sex spaces should be allowed to be members of your party? And should they be allowed to speak freely about and promote their views within your party without being subject to expulsion, exclusion, cancellation, or witch hunts? We've ended on the sort of not the most uplifting questions there, sadly, but hopefully someone's got a more positive one if anyone wants to come in to wrap us up. But
Can you repeat the second one just because
sure.
it was too quick for me? Sorry.
Sorry about that. Kieran's question on what happens to a person elected to the CEC as a public office holder if they lose their public office? And a question in the room, actually. I can repeat it if it's not heard, but
We've heard the words possibility, opportunity, and imagination. These are the things that excited me about this party as well. And I'm just thinking in terms of creating something new in a branch and what kind of life in a branch would look like. What do you think about that? How could your party be part of creating kind of a different culture that does include people and also that builds trust in the party as an organisation that is there for people, that is building the left and that is looking outward into our community?
Nice one, thank you very much. And we will go back around the opposite way. And I think, Chris, which way did you go last time?
I think Zarah
to go first then. There we go.
So Jay's question around the priority being a truth and transparency commission. On our platform, we're talking about a democracy commission, and I'm sure that can include some aspects of truth and transparency, especially around financial audits and making sure that members know exactly how their money has been spent over the last few months. The priority is also to establish a policy conference within the first 6 months, as well as autonomous youth wings and spaces for liberation groups as well to be able to organise, and those have to be well resourced. I think these are really exciting possibilities because all the things that we haven't had for at least 6 months, these are things that we know we need to create as soon as we get into power. And I think, truth and transparency is definitely a big part of that. The question around what happens to a public office holder if they lose their public office, I am not going to create policy on a whim here, and I think members in that policy conference would have to come up with policy on that. Obviously, people who are running now are in elected offices, but we've got May elections and obviously anything else can happen. But we're working with this 6-month window of establishing a political conference where members will decide on constitutional questions like that. So hopefully that does not happen, I should also add. On the question around a party of the working class, a mass party of the working class, and what is happening around trans rights and women's spaces, I think discussions like this end up being incredibly difficult for people who are marginalized, especially trans people who are on, they are being attacked in every possible direction. When we look at outcomes to do with mental health, when we think about employment, when we think about housing, when we think about homelessness, and as a party of the working class, we centre the most marginalised every single time. And that means an understanding that it is all of us, we must defend the most marginalised, because an attack on one is an attack on all. And if people feel like that is something that they do not subscribe to, then I think that is something for them to unpack. But as a party, we will defend trans liberation, we will defend migrants' rights, we will defend policies like anti-Zionism, and it's about understanding that we have to defend the most marginalised people. And as a woman myself, I don't think it's right to reduce womanhood to just bodily functions and and anatomy. This is an experience of how we walk through life. And I have far more in common with trans women when it comes to male violence and other forms of oppression. And I think it's about that understanding being at the heart of the policies that we are creating as a party. And as a slate, we have 2 trans women on our slate, but we also have a women majority slate. And I think it's really actually something that we cherish, because this is how we build a party of the working class. And I think it's important that, recognizing that people might not be where we are in our political journey of, centering the most marginalized, and recognizing that solidarity is the most important thing, and there is safety in that solidarity, but people have to be willing to engage in that in a really, I would say, open way. But I have to say that if anyone is going to be attacking trans rights, then that is something that would not, I think, be part of policy when it comes to what would we call it? We haven't drafted any when people
Code of conduct.
Code of conduct. My brain is absolute mush. But we would have to have a code of conduct, that says you cannot be racist, you cannot be transphobic, you cannot be homophobic. Like, these are basic things, and obviously we haven't got that as a party yet. But I would believe that would absolutely be at the heart of it, a code of conduct. And then just finally on the question around how we can create excitement over what we're building. I think branches being able to run their own political education courses, even if that's done nationally. I think organising around food poverty and being part of that activity locally. I think encouraging members to be involved in their local trade unions and tenants unions. I think branches there's so much possibility. I look at the Workers' Party in Belgium, whose local branches basically provide so many services to the local community. De Linke in Germany have their local branches that have, materials that people might need in their homes, and people who are desperate get in touch because they need a fridge. Your local branch could do so much in your local area, and it's not about just kind of doing what political parties normally do. I think there are space, as long as we have spaces where people are able to come for support, we need to be able to provide whatever that looks like.
Nice one. Thank you very much. Sophie?
I'm just going to go through them in order. On the Truth and Transparency Commission, similar to what Zarah said, and when we do look at the Democracy Commission, I think it's important that we do look at what's happened, but I don't want to start assuming bad faith. And I think it's actually far better to focus on what we can prevent happening again in future. And I think that's kind of going back to, why are we talking about member democracy? Why are we even talking about collective leadership when, there might be a perfectly good candidate for leadership in Jeremy Corbyn, which many of us do unite behind. And I think the answer to that is to prevent what's happened to the Labour Party happening again. And it's to prevent, what we've seen in your party so far. We want to already put in place those structures going forward so that can't happen again. And I think that's got to be the priority rather than ascertaining blame. Simon's question on a mass working class party and those arguing for sex-based rights, and should they be allowed to be your party members? I just want to echo first what Zarah was saying. I've always stood up for trans rights, and I think it's absolutely right that your party does so, and I think it will continue to do so, and I'm very proud of our slate. On should they be members, I think similar to Zarah, I don't think we can be saying that anyone can or can't be members until we have a code of conduct and a disciplinary procedure as well. That being said, I wouldn't advocate for putting people through a disciplinary procedure or saying that they can't be members just because they hold a different opinion to me. And I think that actually the best way of winning these arguments, is to win them democratically, which we have been doing. And I think, when we do have that debate, we've had it in Sheffield, we had it on conference floor, my opinion, you know, that trans rights should be defended and that they are marginalised and that they're not taking anything away from women's rights, does win out as far as I can see. And I'm very proud of that. You know, I think that is the natural position for socialists to be, and everybody's in a different place in their journey and everybody has a different experience. But I think within those conversations, we always need to ensure that we are centering and protecting trans people while we do have those conversations. And I do draw the line for membership, you know, as Zarah said, at people who are being overtly racist, people who are being transphobic and homophobic. I think it's reasonable within a defined parameter to have debates about how policy should actually be enacted. And I'm not expecting the entirety of, you know, it's the working class is not a monolith and is not going to agree on everything. But, you know, when we're having those debates within a set parameters, I think that it can be a safe space to do that. But again, I think, you know, I have seen from experience that people take that too far. And no, I don't think that they should be members. But I wouldn't kind of draw the line at somebody who just has a different opinion to me. Losing public office holder, I'm not going to add any more to what Zarah said, because I just hope that it wouldn't happen and it should be decided by members. And Rosie's question on a different culture for the branches, I also think, you know, we've got a really exciting opportunity here to build something different. I work for a large charity in Sheffield and, you know, very experienced within the charity sector locally and nationally. And, you know, whilst I think that they're all doing good work, I think there's absolutely a space for somewhere that is non-patronising, you know, that is really enforcing solidarity, not charity, you know, saying that, you know, it's not humiliating to ask for help. You know, you don't need to have sign off from loads of middle class officials to say, yes, you're entitled to an extra bag of gruel this week. You know, that actually we're in it together.
Yeah.
And kind of, you know, saying that this is how we want society to be run, and in the spaces that we can run, running it like that and showing how it can be different. And I think that's how branches can be different to, say, a traditional political party, you know, how we can take it forward. We really need to show people what we mean by a different society. And I think that's where branches, especially if they're well funded and well resources, can come into play there.
Definitely not long, boring meetings where, you know, people never come again. I think that has to be absolutely crucial. We do not want to bore people to death.
Yeah, and they need to be there to engage, you know, when there are votes like this, like for the CEC and for your candidate in elections, they need to be there excited to engage and excited to tell other people, you know, to vote for that as well, and to leave them enthused. So yeah, no long boring meetings with
Point
top
of order.
people. Yeah, exactly.
Nice one, thanks, Sophie. And Chris? Yeah, on Jay's first question about truth and transparency, I agree with Sophie, really. I think it is important that we're clear about what has gone on and why it has been the case. But I'm standing for the CEC not to kind of like litigate past arguments, but to actually like get on and build this party. Like I am desperate for there to be a mass socialist working class party in this country, because I don't believe we're going to achieve what we need to in regards to building socialism and anti-imperialism without it. And so that's my priority, is to actually like put the Grassroots Left Slate platform into practice. If there are existing barriers to achieving that, then we need to understand them. But I'm bringing kind of like a forward-looking approach here. And yeah, just echo what Zarah said about Kieran's question on the public office holders position. I guess, you know, this is reflective of a much broader point, which is that we are doing something, as Zarah said, that, you know, is really difficult and unprecedented, like building this party in Britain. There are going to be loads of these kind of quite technical questions that we haven't quite figured out yet. Some of them won't seem very consequential, and some of them will be incredibly consequential. The principle is, you know, isn't necessarily what me or Sophie or Zarah think on every specific issue, but that we create the structures for members to make that decision, them to make it in a way that is engaged and actually doesn't seem kind of detached or technocratic, but is engaging people in the practical politics of building a party that we can all like enjoy participating in. On, I think it was Simon's question. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important to me that your party has decided at the founding conference to be foundationally committed to trans liberation. It's incredibly important to me that the Grassroots Left Slate has echoed that commitment to trans liberation as well, for all of the reasons that Zarah and Sophie said, including that trans comrades have, I think, probably been disproportionately responsible for actually building the party so far. There's so many like trans comrades in Sheffield and in other branches organizing in groups like Democratic Socialist Your Party and others that are contributing to the ideas and the practice of actually making this party happen. And I think that's because of these commitments that have been made so far, and because of the possibility that we all see in having a party that is completely strident in our support for trans liberation. And so when we're thinking about building a mass working class party, yeah, these commitments, these solidarities are crucial to bringing in the working class in its full diversity, whether that be around gender or sexuality or race or anything else. In terms of whether people who disagree with that sentiment should be allowed in the party, I completely agree. I think we should have a robust code of conduct that is about behavior. And for me, the point of being in a party, being united in a party together, is that we have that culture of respect and solidarity and discipline, and that we recognize that if we're going to take the fight effectively to the capitalist class, then we're not going to tolerate people joining a party in order to wage their kind of like petty, hostile issues and harass people. But at the same time, and this relates to Rosie's question about the kind of life and culture of a party, if there are people who disagree with us on the question of trans liberation, but I think that is something that the party should be dealing with through political education, and not necessarily a kind of didactic political education where someone says, I have come to the correct position on kind of gender ideology and I'm going to tell you what to believe and you have to believe it, but a genuine one where you have a healthy, respectful debate, and develop our own understandings of the gender oppression that everyone experiences in capitalism and in patriarchy. And in terms of that vision for what a party could look like, this is something that I and comrades in Sheffield have been thinking a lot about, and I'm really excited about making a contribution to kind of our branch in regards to is, as Sophie said and as Zarah said, not just kind of reproducing the Labour Party in terms of the types of meetings that we run, not running meetings that are very long and boring just because we feel like that's the way that political meetings have to run. I think we can have branches that run different kinds of meetings, so that run political education sessions, as we say, where we learn about the ideas of socialism, learn about what a party is, why we're even building a party, learn, whether it's like theoretical ideas or whether it's like practical ideas from people's experience of organizing, but also, as well as education, kind of sessions around like analysis, where we all come together and actually use that education as a tool to better understand the world around us. Okay, we've read something on the news and it's really horrible. Let's come together and, as socialists, understand what do we think of that, develop our own understanding of why the US is exerting such aggression in Venezuela beyond what the BBC tells us or what the Guardian tells us. Understand, what is the US's relationship to the genocide in Gaza beyond how it's narrated in the mainstream media. You understand, why does the cost of living crisis endure? Why is our economy so stagnant? Again, regardless of what a kind of economics editor in a mainstream newspaper would tell you, and have that education and that analysis actually feed in to the democratic meetings, this kind of procedural democracy that maybe is sometimes seen as the default of a political meeting. It's obviously really important. It's really important to kind of procedurally decide policy, decide our strategy, decide who gets elected to what positions. That stuff becomes, I think, more exciting and more energizing, a more educational collective experience if it's informed by that political education and that analysis. And then finally, I think, those democratic meetings, they then feed into what we actually do. This kind of new culture of a party that does campaign, that does bring together unions, communities, social movements in any given place, and has that kind of cohering function around a shared politics. And then just the last thing I'll say on this is something I've been thinking a lot about is, the real possibility of branches in the party as kind of hubs of socialist culture in communities. We all have the mispleasure of having to, make the best of a capitalist society that is, actually like really driving down standards of culture, is squeezing our lives so much that we have to spend so much time working and surviving that we don't get to enjoy life in the way that we should. And, we very rightly speak about these bigger picture economic issues, the democracy of a party. For me, one of the main reasons why we're socialists and we're building this party is so that we can build a society that we can all enjoy collectively together. So I think branches can become hubs of, places where we come together to enjoy film and literature and theatre and sports and share food together and enjoy music together. Sometimes in a socialist way, sometimes leaving politics at the door and just kind of having fun. But I think, if we're thinking about how do we build a mass party for the working class, it's about recognizing that as working class people, we're the ones who are denied access to this stuff, the enjoyable things in life. And I think a party can build and grow and build socialism through providing that space for, for everyone.
Politics can be fun.
It should be fun.
Nice one. Okay, just looking at the time, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up there. I'd like to thank all of our candidates coming in today. And I'd also like to thank the Grassroots Left Slate for asking me to host in the Sheffield UCU offices. We're currently in dispute with our employer. We are resisting job cuts. We took 4 weeks of strike action last year. We're balloting again for further strike action. And we are in a position where many of our employees and many of our members of the University of Sheffield have been locked out, including Chris Saltmarsh, one of our candidates. We'll share a link in the chat as well, which I think is already in there. Just there's a petition in there if anyone feels they can sign it, or there's also some fundraisers and things as well to support our members who are currently being locked out for 3 weeks for refusing to undermine their own legally taken strike action. It's sort of really exciting though to see that the Grassroots Left Slate, at least from my opinion, my personal opinion, not that of Sheffield UCU, but because we do not support any particular political party, but it's like the level of political discussion that this slate is having and bringing is really exciting, and the sort of positive vision for the party. So not to editorialize from the chair, but I'm excited to vote for the Grassroots Left Slate when I can do, and look forward to hearing more of these sorts of events across the country in the next few weeks. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.